We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
Good morning, or good afternoon, actually.
How good afternoon, guys.
Boy, what a great lead-in. That incredible fourth movement of the Fifth Symphony of Shostakovich.
Something, 1937.
Wonderful.
1937.
A very tense time.
Yeah.
Very tense time.
Leningrad Philharmonic Orchestra with Evgeny Mravinsky conducting, the guy who actually did the premiere. Of course, this is not the premiere recording, but what a music by itself. Huh?
Incredible, incredible. And quite a triumph for Shostakovich, who had been having some trouble.
Oh, major trouble. Trouble to say least. Just imagine, Soviet Union, beginning of 20th century.
Yeah.
When was it? 1934, I think, when Joseph Stalin decided to visit his premiere of his opera, Lady Macbeth, in Bolshoi Theater.
Which I've seen. It's a wonderful opera.
Now, for those who has never been in Moscow, everyone knows about the Kremlin, where the residence of the Tsars was, and Stalin, where Putin right now is residing.
Putin?
Yes.
You look a little like Putin.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're both very handsome.
We didn't want to get into politics in Russia, right? I guess it's
do you ride horses naked?
No, I don't. I got a dog. That's my relationship. All right, so Bolshoi Theater is located right across the street from Kremlin. So the Stalin heard, the dictator heard about Shostakovich, never heard his music. And keep in mind, Stalin had only 4 years of formal education. 4 years only. So this guy decides to walk across the street in the Bolshoi Theater to listen for the premiere of this opera of the young composer. He spends about an hour in the theater listening for the first act.
That's enough.
And he leaves. Yeah, he left. He left without saying anything, except one of his assistants, one of his secretaries heard, this is not a music, it's some kind of mess. And on the next day, all mass media outlets in Soviet Union, television, radio, well, they probably didn't have television that, and primarily radio.
Yeah, but they had written print. Listen.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Yeah.
Listen, want to hear something?
Uh-huh.
All right, you keep talking. I'll find it.
You
keep talking about Stalin. All right.
So, and just imagine, on the next day, Shostakovich wakes up in the morning, no friends at all, almost no friends. He's basically what's called a person non grata. He is not welcomed anywhere. All engagements are cancelled. Moreover, he is scared for his life, obviously, because we forgot to.
Boy, talking about a stream of consciousness, Ruslan. We're right into the music, but we haven't even talked about what's going on. What's the name of our show?
Yeah,
it's the Cool Classics, and we're on LA Talk Radio Live. This is terrible. We haven't even given.
We were so inspired by the music, by Shostakovich, by Stalin. Involvement in the arts.
Talk about a visceral approach to music.
Yeah,
well,
that's what the politics.
But yes, this is LA Talk Live. This is Cool Classics, and I'm Frank,
and I'm Ruslan. Hi guys.
That's right, Feta and Birikov.
Yeah.
And thanks to our wonderful producer. You know, this producer of ours, Richard, is really something. He keeps us really on our toes, or. You know, he tries anyway, but I guess we've been really distracted with Shostakovich and all the pastry.
That'd be good. Yeah, that Frank brought, by the way. Back to Stalin.
All right, but welcome. We're glad to have you here today.
And please feel free to call us at 323-473-3100. Visit our website, thecoolclassics.com. Send us emails. Our email address is cool@thecoolclassics.com.
There we go.
Etc., etc. So, 1934, Stalin visits the Bolshoi Theater, walks out. Shostakovich becomes a person non grata for almost a year. Great, depression, couldn't do anything, no engagements whatsoever. And then he decides to compose a symphony. And this is his fifth symphony.
Right. Let me I have something. Remember, we were talking. If most of our audience, obviously, you're listening to us on digital, it's very high tech and so forth. And Ruslan alluded to the fact that back in the day when the symphony was written, in fact, all of Shostakovich's early symphonies and early works were written, including the opera Lady Macbeth of Mtsinsk District. No television. Yes, there was radio, but everything came through newspapers and magazines, mostly newspapers. And of course, the newspaper Pravda was the official.
That's correct.
Was the official.
I remember.
organ.
I was born in 17.
Right. Now, here's what Pravda had to say about.
Now, Pravda means the truth. The definition
right,
of the word
right.
means the truth.
Now, that's a misnomer.
This is the Soviet truth.
That's a misnomer. Okay, here it says. This referred to his opera Lady Macbeth, a muddle in lieu of music. And this was published in January 26, 1936.
Here we go.
From the outset, wrote Pravda, the listeners were stung by the deliberate and ugly flood of confusing sound. Shreds of melody and choking phrases of music were drowned out, burst forth to vanish again in a pandemonium of creaking, shrieking, and crashes. It is difficult to follow such music and utterly impossible to remember it. This went on nearly throughout the opera. On the stage, the singing was superseded by bawling. When the composer accidentally struck a simple, tuneful melody, he seemed to shrink away from it as from a calamity and to hurt himself with renewed fury into a jungle of confusing sound, in places pure and unadulterated cacophony.
Just imagine.
Now that's very colorful.
How many
I'd
newspapers
say.
did Soviet Union have? Maybe 2 or 3.
Right,
This was the
right.
central.
This was the official
newspaper.
one.
Yeah, this was the
Yeah,
official
right,
newspaper.
right,
Exactly.
right,
Everyone
right.
would read it. Everyone
Right,
would be almost
right.
forced to read it.
Right.
So a year later, in April and July 1937, Shostakovich composes his 5th symphony. So we are listening for, what is it, first movement?
I believe so.
Yeah, this is the first movement.
Good.
So the piece has 4 movements. You guys will be able to listen for it next week in its entirety. And it starts with a pretty heavy, like Passacaglia type beginning. Yeah.
Right.
Actually, can we play the track number 2 right now?
Yeah.
That's the beginning of the whole symphony. Almost like a requiem. Imagine the composer spent a few years in the absolute isolation and no option to leave the country whatsoever.
Right. And some people thought, I think probably after his.
Here it comes. That's it. Yeah.
Good. Is the first movement?
That's the first
good.
movement.
Okay. There it is. Yeah.
It's only strings.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
And the most.
And also this melody.
Yeah, he really separates it. He starts with that low stuff, and he keeps the middle space almost vacant, and then rides those strings on the top. It's wonderful.
This dark
world. And empty in the middle. It's kind of like...
What that reminds me a little bit, the Lord of the Rings section.
Yes, it's very Wagnerian.
Yeah.
It's very Wagnerian. It really is. And actually, some people think that he actually did... have in mind the great German symphonists when he wrote this,
Yeah. I don't think he probably didn't know whether the piece would be performed or not. Keep in mind, everything is controlled in that country.
It's very controlled,
right?
but it did have a big success once it was.
Exactly. It was premiered on November 21st in 1937 in Leningrad. Now it's called St. Petersburg. Leningrad, the city of Lenin.
Interesting.
Yeah. By Leningrad Philharmonic Orchestra under Yevgeny Moravinsky. So this is the conductor who premiered it. The same orchestra, but they recorded, this recording was made, I think, in 1950s or so. So 20, 30 years after it was already performed. All right. Okay, so 4 movements in the symphony.
Yeah.
Moderato, Allegro non troppo. What means Allegro non troppo?
Allegro means happy.
Lively, yeah?
Lively, but not too much.
Not too much. She said
Non
this is
troppo
Allegro
means not
non
too much.
troppo.
Right.
Lively. And the symphony is tragic, obviously, right?
It has tragic moments in it, but it's then very triumphant.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he started it the way he did, with this almost this kind of meandering idea, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then when he does the scherzo, of course, it's one of the most brilliant scherzos he's ever written. It almost, and that is very Germanic too, actually. It's almost, the Germans have a movement called a Ländler, and it's kind of that kind of a heavy dance. You know, it's almost like you have one foot that's heavier than the other.
Ländler preceded waltz.
Right.
Right? So
Exact-
that
yes.
was when
Right,
when we hear waltz.
right.
Imagine slower, heavier waltz, and
right,
you will pretty much get an idea what the
So
Ländler is.
this symphony, in many ways, really, I think, solidified a lot of his sort of neoclassical elements, even though it's still couched in very, very contemporary terms.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Shall we consider this music neoclassical or socio-realistic or realistic? How are we going to appraise this?
I see it as neoclassic in its spirit, or in its more of its form, its form. But I see it very much a product, kind of a culmination of the Russian spirit for that mid-20th century. So it has a certain reality to it, a realism. Realism.
Keep in mind, Shostakovich
it's
started
real-
his career
yeah,
as a pianist in the movie theaters.
Right.
He
yeah,
would
right,
at the silent
right,
movie
right,
theaters. He would play he would improvise right there on the spur of the moment.
right,
That was his early years. He was incredibly inspired by the ideas of communism, wasn't he? Dedicated his first, second, and third symphonies, I believe, to the October Revolution, to Lenin. You know, all
I
these
think that
things.
was a wise idea.
Probably
I think it, in a way,
after Stalin's visit.
yeah,
No more.
I think he didn't want to mess around anymore. He didn't want. I don't think Shostakovich was the kind of the guy that would want to, like Prokofiev, somewhat, and some of the other people, or some of the expatriates too. I mean, Stravinsky he left Russia very, very early.
But those guys were aristocrats. Shostakovich wasn't. He was from a pretty
He was
simple
from a simple family.
Yeah, simple family. Yeah,
right?
yep.
It's true. Yeah. But I think that his spirit. I think he was so pure. I think he had a purity of spirit that the art was more important to him than the politics.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
yeah, and
No
then he
doubt.
used the
No doubt.
politics, whatever he had
No doubt.
to ensure that his music would get
But
played. and it
interesting
worked.
enough, what I heard directly from Rostropovich, who knew Shostakovich very well, that moment with Stalin sort of broken something inside of him. He never could truly appraise his music for himself. Very often he would say, "Today you call me a genius, tomorrow you'll say that it's a piece of shit."
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So big things.
I think he had a very humble spirit, Shostakovich. I don't think he was a braggart. I don't think he was, and also judging from the tremendous early stages of his first compositions, it came relatively easy to him to do this kind of thing. It was not, writing music was his thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
so,
no doubts.
yeah.
No doubts. All right, now let's steer gradually in the 21st century in our contemporaries. Carl Jenkins.
You know what? I've got to admit to you. I am so ignorant. I mean, I've conducted so many things and performed so many things in the last 40 years. I've never performed anything of Carl Jenkins.
Shame on you. Carl Jenkins is considered the most performed composer,
And-
even more performed than John Williams, and he is British.
Well, that's fine.
I
I mean, that's all well and good. I mean, it's great, and I certainly will become more interested in Carl Jenkins, I guess. But but no, I mean it. I'm sure he's done wonderful things. But it was even very funny yesterday. I don't know if it was you. Well, it was you, and then I was with a singer yesterday. We were working on a concert that we're doing, and she happens to be a film composer also. And I said to her, "We got to talk about Carl Jenkins. Who the hell is he?" And she said, "You haven't heard the De Beers commercial?"
Exactly. Yes.
I said, "Oh, that." I said, "Yes, I heard that." So I feel like I'm one of these people. I was talking to somebody else on the phone today, and this gives me an insight. I mean, an insight to a certain kind of mentality. I don't in any way insulate myself from not knowing, but some things just don't come to me. Okay, you're busy with your own life. And someone said just today, I was talking to or it was yesterday actually, and I said, "Well, are you coming to the concert?" And they said, "Oh no, I don't think we'll be able to come." Then I was talking about this person to someone else today, and they said, "Oh, this person never comes to the concerts. They're very interested, but they never come to the concerts." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And they said, "Well, this person said, well, I just don't understand classical music." And so I felt like saying, and I said to this other person, I said, "Well, how are you going to understand it if you don't expose yourself to it?" So here I am today, and I'm going to be exposed to the wonderful Carl Jenkins right here on our radio show.
Okay. Now, here is interesting when you mentioned classical music, right? When I was searching for Jenkins's recordings, and we'll play actually 2 recordings today of his. One will be the a piece called Concerto Grosso, called Palladio, and another one is a big, large. We will play excerpts from those pieces. It's a big mass called The Armed Man. In the rosters, in the catalogs, Carl Jenkins' music very often marked as a pop music. It was interesting detail. Out of all the tracks of the Armed Man Mass, only one was marked as classical.
And where was that? The Armed Man?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the movements of the Armed Man was marked. All others were marked as pop music. Right. So an Armed Man actually it's called a Mass for Peace. Alone has been performed for over 1,500 times in 20 different countries, etc., etc., etc. So let's listen for a first movement of the Palladio,
which I did listen to yesterday, by the way.
Here we go.
I listened to your recording.
We are going to introduce. We are going to introduce this. I almost want to say this tune to our listeners and see if they will actually recognize it.
Sure, they'll all head over to De Beers.
They're supposed to recognize it first.
Which means we're going to get De Beers for a sponsor for this show.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Here it comes.
Here comes James Bond.
That's the diamond moment.
James Bond is going to open the vault and steal a couple of diamonds. He liked the first theme, so he's going to repeat.
Yeah. Okay, now here's how Carl Jenkins himself, appraised it. So he said Palladio was inspired by the 16th century Italian architect Andrea Palladio.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Whose work embodies the Renaissance celebration of harmony and order. 2 of Palladio's hallmarks are mathematical harmony and architectural elements borrowed from classical antiquity and philosophy, which I feel reflects my own approach to composition.
Oh, that's lofty.
It is.
My.
The first movement I adapted, that's what you are hearing right now, first movement I adapted and used for the Shadows A Diamond Is Forever television commercial for a worldwide campaign. The middle movement I have since rearranged for 2 female voices and string orchestra as heard in Cantus in Solitus from my work Songs of Sanctuary. Now, you guys will be able to hear all 3 movements performed by Glendale Philharmonic next Thursday in our show. It will be played in its entirety. Today we are introducing the first movement of it, just to give you sort of a tease and a taste of it. What was I going to say? So the piece composed in the style of Concerto Grosso.
Right.
What is Concerto Grosso, Frank? Any ideas?
Concerto Grosso is normally... Our contemporary audiences are usually accustomed very much to a concerto being the orchestra with a solo instrument, a piano or cello, oboe. The Concerto Grosso is a slightly different thing. It pits one small group with a larger group. And so the soloist actually becomes a small group. It may be a string quartet. It may be 3 instruments. And sometimes it couldn't be a whole another orchestra. It could be two orchestras. One is the major orchestra, and then the other one is the smaller one. Now, another very famous composer who did a concerto. Well, Handel has done many
Vivaldi.
concerto, and Vivaldi.
Baroque composers
Baroque.
work very.
Now,
we're talking about 18th century primarily. when it really
But
became
in the contemporary vein, many composers are
at
doing
the
it.
end of 20th century, right?
Right.
Schnittke, Carl Jenkins.
Exactly. And Igor Stravinsky wrote
Exactly.
one of the most famous ones, which is the Pulcinella, which has small group pitted against
So
the larger
what is
group.
it? Why is it when Bach died? And we will, by the way, when we'll be coming back from commercial, we'll hear a piece by Bach,
Right.
organ piece.
Yeah.
When Bach died, people were saying that his music is uninteresting and dry. He was forgotten for 100 years, right? Why is it that at the end of 20th century, midst of 20th century, all of a sudden we are looking back into
Because
18th century,
everybody,
and all of a sudden it's so popular, and contemporary composers use those forms.
Yeah, because the forms, I think, are basically sound. And, music has been something that's been recycled. I hate to use that term recycled. It sounds so pejorative. But
I feel it's almost like a trash can.
but it's
Sounds
true.
to me.
I mean, we recycle. And then, for example, I did this wonderful thing by, what's that, the Englishman. No, he's from...
Britain?
Benjamin Britten has
Benjamin-
written
yeah.
Concerto Grossi too. Now I forget. Anyway, Ibert. Let's say Ibert. Ibert has written a wonderful overture, which I've done a number of times, but it's done for a Mozart size orchestra, but it sounds like Ibert.
Okay, so we need to clarify what is Mozart size orchestra. We're talking about primarily
We're
strings.
we're talking
right, about 25
strings
to 35
and-
people.
Well, two flutes, two oboes, two cellos. Two flutes, two oboes, two clarinets, two bassoons, two horns, two trumpets, strings, and timpani. That's your standard
Smaller
classical-
size
orchestra.
Yeah.
So
Not that what you hear in Shostakovich.
right. Oh, Peter Maxwell Davies. Right. He also wrote a wonderful piece, which is for that size orchestra, which is basically the same orchestra that Mozart used in his later symphonies, Haydn used in his later symphonies, Beethoven in his early symphonies. But he applies his own musical style, but puts it in a context that is classical. It has a little classical feeling to it. And every once in a while, you'll hear something very piquant, some little nasty note that comes in, or some phrase that's a little turn of a phrase that you say, wait a minute, that's not classical musical at all. So it's kind of recycling for contemporary audiences. Now, other great recyclers of what I would call classical or Baroque, especially English Baroque stuff, were the Beatles. They sort of started that charge saying, we can take popular music and we can make it, for instance, the song Eleanor Rigby, for example. It sounds, you hear strings and it sounds like it could be Bach or Vivaldi, and then you hear Eleanor Rigby, So all this kind of this recycling of an attitude or harmonies or orchestration puts something fresh in people's ears, and if it's being done by a contemporary composer, it also fulfills the need to have contemporary composers. I mean, yes, they may also write in a more acerbic style, which is more dissonance perhaps, or more complicated rhythms and stuff like that. But I think it's important to keep putting. Mr. Jenkins,
Exactly.
our
I think
has done
it's
this.
Very important.
He's done that. He's
it's
done
very
that.
important, as Richard reminds us.
So now
to,
we have really made him important. Here
absolutely. No,
today.
but I think what's really important for us right now to offer our listeners some of the messages from our sponsors.
Oh, is it time?
Oh yeah.
By all means.
Please, we will be back.
We'll be
just
back in a
minutes.
few seconds. Wonderful.
Thank you for tuning into LA Talk Live and the Talk Live Broadcast Network, original reality radio, handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk. Stay tuned.
What would your life be like if you needed blood transfusions every 2 or 3 weeks just to survive, and if you had to worry about all the iron from that blood making your heart and liver shut down? That's just what life is like for a person with thalassemia. If 2 people who each carry the trait for thalassemia have a child, there's a 25% chance with each pregnancy that the child will have thalassemia. For more information, visit the Cooley's Anemia Foundation at www.thalassemia.org. That's THALASSEMIA, or call 212-279-8090.
Designs by Ardina, preserving heritage and building legacies through art. Turn your favorite photos into personalized, one-of-a-kind, customized artwork. Designs by Ardina offers innovative and creative options for printing on aluminum, acrylic, canvas, with custom framing and matting services available upon request. Designs by Ardina also offers photo restoration, portrait art, digital photo albums, and even basic business printing services. For more information and a customized quote, visit www.designsbyardina.com. That's www.designsbyardina.com, or call 323-455-1251. That's 323-455-1251. Designs by Ardina, proud sponsors of LA Talk Live and the Talk Live Broadcast Network.
Hi, this is Frank.
And this is Ruslan.
Inviting you to join us every Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific, for Cool Classics.
Join us as we discuss classical cool in the arts, what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen.
So don't forget to tune in to Cool Classics
Every Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific.
exclusively on latalklive.com.
You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B, Radio Flag, TuneIn Radio, Aha Radio, TiVo Radio, and Apple TV Radio.
Or just watch and listen directly at Cool Classics on latalklive.com.
Classic radio handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure.
This is LA Talk Live, and this is Frank.
And this is Ruslan.
And we are more than just talk. Hi, Ruslan.
Hi, Frank. And we
We're
got
back.
a guest here. Yeah, the Cool Classics are back. So Timothy Howard is in the studio. He is the director of music in Pasadena Presbyterian Church in Pasadena, California. That's here in Los Angeles. He's also a lecturer at California State University Northridge. He plays recitals. He conducts. He has doctorate of musical arts from USC, University of Southern
that's
California.
great. Isn't that wonderful?
He
There you
is a
go.
third-generation Californian, and he was born in La Mesa.
That's
San
why he
Diego.
looks like a surfer, right?
Yeah. Timothy, welcome.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything?
No,
Should we add
That's
something?
basically the stuff.
Okay, wonderful. So, they are going to perform your choir, right? How to pronounce it? Is it choir or chorus? What do you prefer?
Either way,
Either way is
the name of the group is Kirk Choir of
Uh-huh.
Pasadena Presbyterian
Now, why is
Church.
it called Kirk Choir?
Kirk is sort of the Presbyterian, actually not Presbyterian, the Scottish name for church.
Oh, okay. There you go. All right. I was always wondering that because actually I performed at your church a number of times.
And you wondered what Kirk was all about.
Yeah, I said, well, here I am, the wee Kirk of the Pasadena.
That is
there we
it.
go. Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you guys are performing tomorrow, actually.
We are.
The piece by Carl Jenkins, the composer who
who
is the
we
most
heard,
performed
Palladio.
composer of all.
Which
And-
I just heard for the first time yesterday.
You're never too young to get something
That's
new.
right.
Frank.
Yeah, you're right. That's why we're doing this show, Timothy. Yeah.
So, and you guys are going to perform the piece called The Armed Man. Now, why didn't you tell us something about this armed man? Because I have to say, I listened for it. To me, it sounds like a requiem. Is that correct?
It is in a sense, and one of the things that we do is every year is on the occasion of Good Friday, which is the Friday before Easter, and this year is tomorrow. We do some sort of major performance, and sometimes it is in fact a requiem. When we don't do a requiem, oftentimes I look for a piece of music that has that aesthetic, but is not necessarily specifically a requiem. Carl wrote this piece in 1998 and 1999 during the Kosovo crisis in Europe. And so those things were very much in his mind at that time. It was premiered in 2000. It was on commission. So I think even though it's not specifically a requiem, it has that aesthetic behind it. There is no requiem movement, for example. It's got a Kyrie and it's got a Sanctus, but no requiem.
But let's... Okay,
So,
first of all,
what's the text? Is it who's the poet?
The text is from the Roman Catholic Mass. There are three movements.
I'm well acquainted with that.
Good. There are three movements from the Mass: the Kyrie, the Sanctus, and the Benedictus. Although he separates those and puts the Benedictus almost at the end of the piece, and then the Agnus Dei. And in addition, there are texts from the Bible, specifically Revelation, the Mahabharata, the Adnan from the Islamic Call to Prayer. And then two texts, one by Tennyson and one by Kipling. So in a sense, he's taken the Roman Catholic Mass as a structure and he's put other things around it, not unlike, for example, what Benjamin Britten did with the War Requiem.
Yeah, we just going to mention.
Right.
And by the way, what we forgot to mention, the very first piece that you guys just heard. The piece
Oh, yes,
with
that
the-
was
but-
Timothy,
played by-
wasn't it?
that was Timothy playing.
That was
by
me
the way.
Playing
playing.
Bach. Yeah, it was great.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it sounded really
Was that on
really
the organ
wonderful.
there at the church?
And no, that was recorded at my previous church, which was All Saints Pasadena. All
Oh,
Saints
okay,
Episcopal
sure. I know
Church in
that church very
Pasadena.
well too. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Now, why don't we listen for the beginning of the Armed Man, and then we'll come back and discuss
Lovely.
the piece.
Sounds
yeah?
good. Let's
okay,
do that.
Richard, if you can. Sounds good, Frank. Do you like it?
I do.
Yeah, isn't it? So what is it in the very beginning of the movement? Because as I just mentioned it, to me it sounds almost like someone is marching, right? Is it the drums? Is it what is it?
What's the first text?
Is it-
Actually,
Okay, two things. The first sound that you hear actually is a field drum and a snare drum together in a marching pattern. The tune that is stated first in the piccolo and then now by the choir is L'Homme Armé, which is a medieval popular tune. It was all the rage in Europe and throughout the latter part of the Renaissance and latter part of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, many composers took this tune and used it for other compositions like Mass. And so you have composers that wrote the Missa Lo Marmé, and they use this tune in various forms. And what Carl Jenkins has done is he's taken it and stated it right up front. And the Lo Marmé is actually, on the face of it, a celebration of the armed man. And it says the armed man is the one who will prevail. And so right up front, Carl Jenkins is setting us into this juxtaposition of, okay, here's what history says, here's what society says, and then over the course of the next, there's the string basses and cellos, over the course of the next 70 minutes or so, he brings us around by the selection of texts to the very closing, which, are we going to play the end of that?
No, I'm actually very curious about the second movement, which I was stunned to. Can we put the second movement? It's surprise, without saying anything.
Okay.
Let's just surprise our listeners with that, what they're going to hear right now.
Is this the Muslim thing?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
That's by far probably the only inclusion of the Muslim in the Requiem,
to my knowledge, it is.
Yeah. It's truly surprising. It was truly surprising turn of events for me, frankly, when I was listening.
It's funny though too. It sounds like it sounds very Welsh at the same time. There's something very strange about it. You know, yes, it's Muslim, but it also has that kind of folkish quality, which is just very interesting. It has a certain primitiveness to it, which is nice.
So why Muslim? What is any idea why?
Carl Jenkins' major works, including his Requiem and this piece and the Stabat Mater. We performed his Stabat Mater 5 years ago, so I'm very familiar with that. So both the Stabat Mater and the Armed Man, he takes traditional Western European texts and he folds in other things. For example, in the Stabat Mater, the choir actually sings in something like 5 different languages, not all of them Western European. And so I think in this particular piece, where he starts out with a very Western piece in a very structured, rhythmic, melodic sense, and then he puts right on top of that the Islamic call to prayer. I think it's his statement that we are all unity, we are all one.
Well, you picked the right piece for this week, didn't you?
Oh boy!
No, where exactly? What's the address of the church? How it's a free concert? By
Correct.
The way.
Pasadena Presbyterian Church is located at 585 East Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. The website is ppc.net. We also have ppcmusic.org. Both of those websites have information about the concert and directions to and parking information for the church.
Oh, that's good. I was going to mention the parking because I've always had trouble parking there.
Yeah, it's sort of an inner
it's a little tricky,
town thing.
You can find it, but you can.
And you guys have other concerts there for free as well.
We do a concert series of as many as 11 concerts per season. Most of them are on Saturday evenings. This one being on Good Friday. It has to be on Friday, of course. We also do a Music at Noon every Wednesday from 12:10 to 12:40, except when Wednesday hits a major holiday.
I've done a couple of those myself at the church, and you've done some remarkable things. I remember one time someone said, there's an unannounced concert on a Wednesday, and it ended up being Midori.
Midori, yes. Yes.
For those who don't know, Midori is one of the major violinists of our time.
And I heard on the way here today, I thought I had to mention this because on the way here today, I was listening to Midori's performance of the Mendelssohn with the Berlin Philharmonic all the way here. But I remember that was kind of that's neat. That's a nice surprise, spontaneous LA kind of a thing.
It is.
You know,
she's
great.
a local girl now.
Yeah,
you know.
That's
She
great.
lives in Pasadena?
Yeah. Well, not in Pasadena, but she teaches at USC, of course.
True.
Yeah.
So she's the highest.
So-
But
Local
and I might
local
add, it's a
sense.
wonderful facility. The church is exquisite. And also now it's located in an area where there's lots of restaurants and stuff like that. So
we have good eats in the
it's very
neighborhood.
friendly. It's friendly toward an evening's activity, you know, and it's a very grand, beautiful, unusual shape, but very comfortable to sit in and very comfortable to hear concerts in.
And for all of our concerts that we do for Friends of Music, which is the organization that supports the concert series and Music at Noon, everything we do is free to the public.
Right.
That's remarkable. So you teach at Cal State Northridge. You
Correct.
give lectures there. What are the lectures?
Well, I'm the organ instructor,
Mm-hmm.
but I teach in the music theory area. I teach harmony, I teach counterpoint, I teach music analysis, and I also teach musicianship.
So from the viewpoint of lecturer in the university, say I am a student, say I'm just trying to position myself in the shoes of our common listeners, so to speak. What is classical music?
Oh boy.
How do you, when you say classical music, how do we identify this music is classical, that one isn't? What is the defining kind of?
Well, it's interesting that you would ask something like that when we're listening to Carl Jenkins, because certainly at some level, Carl Jenkins' history and his output might even be called crossover between classical and whatever classical is not.
Well, that's why I was surprised when I was making searches. He very often listed in the catalogs as pop. His music is.
I think that
pop.
comes from his history. I mean, he's a classically trained composer, but he made his name as basically a rock musician. And so then when he comes to composition, again, it is in the commercial realm. And then he's sort of transferring out onto the concert stage as well. But I think that once he finds his musical voice, it's hard for him to change it. And the aesthetic of it being classical is that he's using a large orchestra. He's using traditional performing forces. He is performing or composing mostly in traditional musical language.
So
the language that we would expect to hear if we went to a concert of Mozart, for example.
Okay, so John Williams, the rival, okay, also over, close to 50 Oscar nominations, I would imagine John Williams is, as performed probably as. Is he a classical composer, or he's something, or he's just a movie composer?
Now. I think he is now. But I here's an interesting one, and I go along with Timothy on this. For example, I did a Beatles concert maybe 5-6 years ago at my Marina Del Rey concerts, and we did a huge suite. It's a half-hour suite for a huge symphony orchestra of Beatles songs that have been very skillfully woven into this symphonic fabric. So as I conducted it and studied it and did it, and also it's very difficult to play. I mean, the person who did the arrangement of it made it worthy of like playing a Mahler symphony or something like that. And yet has the appearances of the Beatles. It has the rhythm, the harmonies, the wonderful melodic invention of Beatles tune. So did the Beatles become classical, or
they
the
classical when they
become
are
Beatles? But so I think what I look at it a little bit on this issue. Now, if we had played, prior to playing this though, we had a group of 5 people, 4 people, who were Beatles imitators, actually doing a couple of Beatles tunes, a totally different context. But then when we got to the symphonic thing, it made it rise to a whole new level. To my mind, to a classical level, rather than being a pop level.
So how do you think Bach, when he was composing, was he thinking of himself as of a classical?
I don't think he was thinking of that at all. I think he was just
what
thinking
about
of being Bach.
Beethoven, Mozart?
And also he was writing within the context of the history.
There are Viennese classics, right? And there is that what we consider larger size classical music.
However, here's one thing you could do. You could take a great Bach piece, go to a Brandenburg or something like, and put a drum beat to it, and you get basically what pop music about. Most pop music that we know of is taking one tempo more or less and keeping it throughout the piece. Now, some pop singers and pop composers have changed that. So where they'll put something, a variant.
Basically what you're saying that there is a pop music, but there is a possibility to elevate it to the level of classical.
That possibility exists.
Am I hearing it correct?
Well, you're hearing it correct, but I don't think it's hard and fast.
Are you setting the classical music above?
No.
No, because then what do you do with jazz?
No.
And we have the same problem when we're teaching classes. We say this is classical music and this might be popular music, but
doesn't mean that classical is not popular?
No, it doesn't.
What happens if a classical piece becomes popular?
Yeah, tell me.
Is it
Well,
then?
Carl Jenkins,
Is it
that's a
then?
good,
Is it then
you know,
popular music?
Just the Armed Man was performed 1,500 times, and it's a huge piece.
I think
in 20 countries.
All right. I'll put it in one way. I hate to put it this way, and I'll get a lot of people. I think that a lot of times in pop music, especially where there's vocalists concerned, subject matter may be a little more on the simplistic side. However, that principle could be refuted where people create terribly complex thoughts, maybe because it's natural to them or because they've taken drugs to create those thoughts. Mm-hmm. So those thoughts are very complex and they're very much linked into your nervous system, into your whole mental system and your cerebral cortex and whatever else. In some other conditions, what a classical composer does might be very, very simple. For example, take something like, da dee da da dee da 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 dee da. I mean, the Pavane, very simple, but it's not. We don't think of it as pop music. We think of it as classical music. Okay. So even simplicity may not be the definer of pop music, or complexity the definer of classical.
All right,
music.
here's a different question then. What is for you, for you, Frank, as well, for both of you? What is art? How to identify that this cup is art, a piece of art, or not? Say I am.
It might be.
How? What will be my? What is art?
For me, it's about a level of aesthetic. Mm-hmm. Is there something that is aesthetically pleasing in some way that another cup is not, like Frank's plastic cup over there?
Sorry, Frank.
Two cups. And this one might be more aesthetically pleasing.
And yet this is, for me, more pleasing because I can see what's in it.
Well, and there you are.
So
and you can tell how much there is.
And I can tell how much there is. And it is a simpler design. It's replicatable very, very simply, So I don't, this argument is the kind of things that in some ways is much better to be, really sloshed and talk about and enjoy as an argument. I don't think there's much argument, yet there should be perhaps some standards, maybe, I don't know. So the question would be, let's put it on a practical level. If a symphony orchestra plays a pop tune, is that a classical experience or is it a pop experience? I think it's both. Does it have to be one or the other?
Arguably, it's both.
Yeah.
This question goes outside of the realm of music as well. I mean, think of photography. When does a photograph become a piece of art? Is it possible for a photograph that was not meant to be a piece of art, perhaps a shot of a news event, to become a piece of art?
Exactly.
And I think that there are many, I can think of some, that photographs from news events that have become iconic to the point that people would consider them art. And I think that
like that picture of the Vietnamese girl.
That one comes to mind.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. And there are others from the Vietnam conflict as
sure,
well.
Of course.
Specifically.
Yeah, sure.
But I suspect that it possibly happens also in the realm of music. That there are pieces that may not have been considered to be quote-unquote classical when they were conceived. For example, as Frank is lifting up the Beatles. And you mentioned Eleanor Rigby with the strings, and I think of Penny Lane with the piccolo trumpet.
Exactly.
And how classical those all are. Well, are they classical because they have crossed that particular line in somebody's mind, in my mind, in your mind, Ruslan, or in Frank's mind? Possibly so.
You know why they're classical? Because they're cool.
All right, guys. So tomorrow in Pasadena Presbyterian Church, why don't you mention it once again? Where exactly, when exactly, how to get there?
At 7:30 p.m. tomorrow, March 25th. At 7:30 p.m. at Pasadena Presbyterian Church, 585 East Colorado Boulevard in Pasadena. The website is ppc.net or ppcmusic.org. It's a free concert. You'll be hearing The Armed Man, A Mass for Peace by Carl Jenkins with orchestra, choir, soloists, and we have our own muezzin to do the Adnan, the Islamic call to prayer. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and anybody that's in town is most welcome. Please come and bring friends.
By all means, and I wish I could be there. I'm going to be engaged myself, but my thoughts will be with you because it
Thank
sounds
you.
like, and it would also increase my exposure to Carl Jenkins, which I desperately need.
I might be there tomorrow. Actually,
That'd be
I'm
great.
very interested. in
So
listening.
I have a question. We have
So we have
Mr. Proust here.
Yeah, yeah.
What is it that you most disliked, Timothy?
That I most dislike.
Most dislike,
Yep.
yeah.
That I most dislike. Dishonesty.
Okay.
What is your greatest fear?
Boy. I'm having trouble coming up with the greatest fear.
Do you have any?
Maybe you are fearless.
My loneliness.
Loneliness.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. I don't think with your charm that'll be a problem.
thank
so,
you.
so let's see. Oh yes.
Microphone.
Yeah, I'm reading. Okay. What? Oh yes. What? Oh. I don't want to ask that question. Let's see. Which living person do you most admire, or is that? I mean, that's a pretty broad thing. You probably have several.
Which living person do I most admire? I think the people that I most admire are the people that have been my mentors.
Mm-hmm. Good.
People that have had a direct impact on me, in my life, my career,
Right.
my profession. So the one that comes to mind right now is the rector emeritus of All Saints Church Pasadena, George Regas.
George Regas. He was a
Yeah.
great guy. Marvelous
and
guy. Yeah.
he's still alive, so he's
Is he really?
living. Yes,
Really?
he is. I would also put into that one of my teachers at USC, Richard Wingell, who is deceased now, but not too long ago.
Now, this is a name I do not know.
He was on the music history faculty and wrote some books, and just a fabulous, fabulous man. And
Yeah.
took an interest in me, as he did in many students, and I really looked up to that man.
Here's a non-Proustian. Could I ask this one?
Sure.
What sparked your interest in music in your youth? I think because that's important for listeners to know.
My parents tell me that as young as 2 and 3 years old, and if they were tuning the radio, and they would come across piano music, and I'd say something like, "No, I don't want to listen to that," and they'd come across orchestra music. "No, I don't want to listen to that." And they'd come across organ music, and I would say, "That's what I want to listen to."
Really? Okay.
And so very early on, they identified it, organ music specifically, and now by extension, basically all other kinds of music, as something that I would be interested in. And through a story that I won't bore you with, they bought a small spinet organ when I was 4, and I started taking lessons on the organ at age 4.
That's very young for organ.
Running out
are
of
we
time.
running out of time?
Last question.
All
then
right,
we'll
you
go
ask
into
a
the commercial
question.
break, and then we'll do.
All
the-
right,
the
wonderful.
closure. Last question for you.
Yes.
When you die and you meet with a God, what are you going to tell him?
That I did the best with what he gave me.
It was Timothy Howard.
Timothy
Ladies and
Howard,
gentlemen.
thanks for being
Thank
with
you.
us on
Thank you very
Cool
much.
Classics today, Timothy. It was great.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
So, we have.
having a break now.
Oh, we have a break. We're not done though. Oh, okay.
That's what it is, I'm always war. Always war. That's what it is, I'm always war. Always war. That's what it is, I'm always war. Always war. That's what it is, I'm
Thank you for tuning into LA Talk Live and the Talk Live Broadcast Network, original reality radio, handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk. Stay tuned.
All right.
We're back, Ruslan.
That's cool.
Boy, that went fast, didn't
yeah.
it? And Timothy's wonderful commentaries and his wonderful enthusiasm for the stuff that he's doing.
He's just a wonderful human being, I think.
Great guy. Great guy. And I think that I hope that lots of people will attend the performance of the Armed Man tomorrow at the Pasadena Presbyterian Church. Because I think it's very apt for what's been going on in Belgium and what's been going on in San Bernardino. And I might add, to our audiences, I am the conductor of the San Bernardino Symphony Orchestra. And despite many of the trials of that city, we do have a vibrant, actual cultural life going on there. And tomorrow night, or actually Saturday night, we'll be performing a Shostakovich symphony. And it's going to be the 9th Shostakovich symphony, which was written actually around 1945 or so. It's a very hopeful piece and probably one of his funniest symphonies. You know, he wrote like 15 symphonies, and most of them are pretty serious and pretty grandiose. This is not as grandiose, and it's actually one of his shortest, clocking in at about 22 minutes. And it is simply brilliant. So if you can get out to San Bernardino, check on the website for all the information. The concert will be at 7:30, and our soloist will be Rufus Choi, the first winner of the Jose Iturbi competition, and a world-class pianist performing the great Rachmaninoff's second piano concerto, which I think you heard on our broadcast last week, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. But it's always wonderful being able to see you at these concerts, so I hope you'll be there.
I hope you guys will enjoy the next Thursday at 1 p.m. Shostakovich Symphony No. 5 in its entirety.
Oh, you'll love it. How long is it? It's about
50 minutes.
Yeah,
50-something minutes. And Carl Jenkins Palladio.
Perfect.
With the recognizable De Beers commercial.
Yes.
tune.
And by next week, I'll know much more about Carl Jenkins, and so will all of you.
And in 2 weeks, we'll be back in the studio, and our guest on April 7th will be wonderful cellist Antonio Lisi. He is a Grammy Award-winning musician. He's a professor at UCLA. Yes, and we'll be talking also about Pyatigorski Festival, which is about to happen in the month of May. Some of the major musicians are arriving, including Yo-Yo Ma, Misha Maisky, Giovanni Salima. So it's a truly major event with LA Philharmonia getting involved, and etc. It's going to be interesting. We'll be playing a lot of interesting, unusual recordings, I should say. And of course, since Frank brought San Bernardino, and I would like to remind that Frank and myself.
I'm glad you brought that up. Right, we have one more. I think we have a broadcast before that, though. We'll be good. Yeah.
But we are performing together on May 28th with San Bernardino Symphony, and I'll be the soloist doing the famous Rococo variations by Tchaikovsky.
Talking about once again a composer going back to another era to do something. You see,
Tchaikovsky, romantic composer that lived in 19th
Exactly.
century, composed a piece in a style of 18th century.
Actually, right.
It's exactly 2 p.m. in Los Angeles right now. Cool Classics.
Is it time for us to go?
Yeah, it looks like it. And we are going to go with the Shostakovich Symphony No. 5 with the third movement. It's kind of
so next time. Yeah, please come back and join us for great talk and pastries.
And we'd like to thank our sponsors, particularly Michael Bond, who underwrites our wonderful, it's not modest of me to say wonderful broadcast.
You can certainly say that.
I meant to say,
and I want everyone to call in and agree.
Yeah. Guys, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, and thanks to Richard. Wonderful.
Yes, and hope.
And
to
what are we? I'm Frank,
and I'm Ruslan,
and we are the Cool Classics. Bye bye.
Thank you for tuning into LA Talk Live and the Talk Live Broadcast Network, original reality radio, handcrafted for your listening and viewing pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk. Stay tuned.